Alright, with those set, now if I move a few of these tools out of the way, move my view around, and remember where I painted? Look at that. Shrubs, bushes. And again, with the deco layer selected, painting still selected, I can control left and actually go and paint these wherever I want them. So paint a little bit over here, and there we go, where you can we can paint decorations wherever we want. And again, I can set the strength down and not paint so harshly. And we'll actually get into other ways of controlling some of the thickness of these of the deco layer itself. But that's the basics of creating and placing pieces in a deco layer. Now we're going to go just a little bit further and take a look at the color and scale maps. First, the color map. You'll notice that as these static meshes are getting placed, they're using their default texture color. Nothing else is overriding their color or adding to it. And you actually have an extra layer of control that allows you to take a color map and assign it to this deco layer and add an extra level of color to these static meshes. Here's what I'm talking about. I'll go ahead and bring in a new texture, just a very basic. I'll turn generate maps off just because it shouldn't be noticeable, and maybe not necessarily here, but other parts of terrain generation can actually cause problems. Let me just pull this in. CMap 3 should be fine, and with that I'll simply grab that color map because I want to try and impose these colors over the static mesh. So I'll simply right click and say get color texture from current, and let's see, I might have to either rebuild or re-grab the map. It all depends on how it was set up. If I was to rebuild, let's see, if it doesn't immediately grab the map, you can always try opening up the actual default properties of the terrain info back under deco layers, and under the color map, clear it out and maybe hit use current, and that will force it to grab that texture. And now you notice over here, and the way this works is since this is a 128 by 128 texture, it's only displaying this large because under view we had 256 by 256, lowering that down, and there's the actual size. Now if you remember, all our height and alphas are also 128 by 128, meaning that we start at what looks like blue at this edge and then work our way over the green stripe. And so on this side of the map, if we were to go back to layers, deco layer, so we could paint on it some more, you'll notice the shrubs over there are sort of reddish colored. So it's just an extra way of putting color over it. Obviously, you probably wouldn't use just primary colors, but it's kind of nice to be able to specify that some meshes in a certain area take on a different color. And one last thing to point out is the fact that if you're using a color map, it has to be an RGB A8, otherwise the color will be black. And it's also helpful to make sure that the dimensions line up with the current the height map size, so that it's very easy to tell. Let me see if I can zoom out just a little bit. Where we have blue, so blue stripe, we work more over towards the middle of the terrain, middle stripe, work over to the far side, the red stripe. So that's the basics of grabbing a color map to add some extra color to your deco layer. Now, finally, we have the ability to use a color map to specify individual scaling. Well, not individual to mesh, but individual to an area type scaling. And this is a little bit interesting. The way this scaling works is it takes the color value, red, green, or blue, and uses that to define an X, Y, or Z scale. So if we were to go real quick and grab and set the scale texture from current, and again, if it doesn't want to take immediately, you can always just load up the terrain info itself under deco layers, under scale map, clear and use, and just to force it to take. Now, take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. Let me go back over to those red shrubs, and notice how they're all kind of thin and pointing up and down that way. If I was to scroll all the way back over, and the green ones are basically aligned in the Y direction, and the blue ones are scaled up in Z. So it's taking the color information and applying it to this deco layer as scale information. Now, to be really useful, I mean, you wouldn't even necessarily use all the colors all at the same time. For example, you could keep your red and green colors or levels the same throughout, and simply vary the amount of blue, and then you would be varying the Y scale. So if you wanted very accurate control over the Y scale of your deco layer, it's not really that hard to do. Just bring in a map that has varying blue colors, blue for Z, and you can specify Z scale for areas of your deco layer. Now let's see, with that, that's pretty much the basics of setting up a DecoLayer and applying not only an editable density map through layers, but also adding color on top of the static mesh and scaling it with a color map. Now you have similar controls to layers. You can duplicate or delete. So if you wanted, say for example, if you wanted a set of trees, I mean we could go. If you wanted some grass, let's see, we could just go ahead and we can duplicate this one or go create a new one. And this one, let's see, we might need to create a new layer for the density. So let me go ahead and grab new, and let's see, DecoLayer 2. So I'll put some grass or trees on this one. And again, start off transparent. And the final DecoLayer, let me scroll down a little bit and grab. Okay, where did I put that? Okay, there. Okay, DecoLayer 2, I had the right one selected. So both DecoLayers are below what we're actually using for texture information. Now with DecoLayer 2, let me go find that real quick. So hunting DecoLayer 2. Let's set the density from the current texture. So now we can paint on DecoLayer 2 to specify grass. Of course, no static mesh yet, so we'll go and grab static meshes and let us find a nice grass. As I hunt around a little bit. So a little bit of grass. Let's get the current static mesh from current. And now, again, using the painting on this layer, I should be able to paint a little bit. Again, the same thing with I have to be able to set the view range. So let me go ahead and bring up the properties. I still have the terrain info selected. DecoLayers, you see we have that second DecoLayer in element 1. Hunt down, go find the fade out radius, and fade out radius for, or was it, did it get switched around? Right, it got added in above, so we're actually, 0 is actually the second one, the grass layer, if you will. Fade out radius, here we go, 0. Let's up this to 4,000. And then fade out after 6,000, be completely invisible. And now, grass. So you can see, you can have as many DecoLayers as you want. Just keep in mind that you don't want to go too crazy with this for performance reasons. But we can go in there and paint some grass in between. So there we've got multiple DecoLayers. And again, we could take this grass layer and start assigning specific color or scale to it if we wanted to. And go and bring up the display of which DecoLayers to show. So we can very easily show and hide individual ones. Or completely hide all of them if you want to go back to basic terrain editing without the DecoLayer in the way. I'm going to turn them all back on. So that's basic DecoLayer editing.
All right, very cool, very powerful. So that's going to conclude this lesson. Thanks.